The sound of the piano wasn't just music. It was like a trapped scream in a dark cave, echoing without ever finding an exit. The keys answered cold, metallic, but with each note, QM seemed to beg for something he no longer knew how to name. Have you ever heard a sound capable of piercing your skin, setting your breath on fire, waking a dormant desire? And what if that sound came from someone you never imagined you'd meet? That's how it all began. In an empty auditorium, wrapped in the smell of old wood and heavy curtains that kept secrets, a voice cut through the silence. A raw, imperfect voice, but one laden with something dangerous. It was as if rain and fire mixed in the same breath. In that instant, QM was no longer the cold prodigy of the music school. He was just a young man swept away by a sound that burned inside. And Hye-Rin, the unknown girl who dared to sing without permission, was not just a newcomer. She was the flame that would set fire to his prison of keys and scores. Imagine two souls that should never meet. A pianist who knows only discipline. A singer who only sings when she feels. And when their melodies touched for the first time, it wasn't just harmony that was born. It was temptation. It was vertigo. It was the beginning of a blaze impossible to extinguish. But in a place where every note is watched, where the maestro lays down rules like an implacable judge, how far would they dare go? And when the music became too dangerous, what would they choose? The discipline that keeps them safe, or the passion that could destroy them? The stage is set, the curtains open, and at the back of the room, a forbidden melody begins to be born. The sound of the piano echoed through the empty auditorium like an intimate whisper. Each key pressed by QM felt like a cold touch on warm skin, and the silence between the notes sounded more dangerous than the melody itself. He played alone, but he wasn't alone. Not really. That's when a soft voice drifted down the corridor, and the world seemed to stop. It wasn't technical. It wasn't perfect, but there was something raw, provocative, almost indecent in the way the notes escaped. QM stopped playing. His fingers hovered over the keys, his chest caught in a breath he didn't want to admit. He turned slowly. In the doorway, a young woman watched him. Loose hair, a curious gaze, and parted lips as if holding a secret. In her hands, a folder of sheet music that trembled. Or were her hands trembling? "Sorry," she said, her voice low but loaded with nerves. "I didn't know anyone was here." QM tilted his head, assessing her as if she were another sound he needed to decipher. His eyes traveled over her, lingering too long on her lips before climbing back to her eyes. "Who are you?" he asked, in a cool tone that hid a trace of curiosity. "Hye-Rin, I'm new here. I sing." The pause she made was almost an invitation. Or at least I try. A thick silence fell between them, charged with something that had nothing to do with music. QM turned back to the piano, played 2 soft notes, and let this slip out. "If you're going to sing, sing properly. Your voice is too beautiful to be wasted like that." The provocation sent Hye-Rin's heart racing. She didn't know whether to feel insulted or seduced, but instead of fleeing, she stepped forward. The stage's wooden boards groaned beneath her, as if complicit in that dangerous approach. She drew a deep breath and began to sing again. This time, steadier, bolder. QM accompanied her without asking permission, as if his piano were her body to be explored. Every note he played felt like an invisible touch, every pause like a breath caught between the two of them. When the last note dissolved, the silence was almost erotic. QM rose from the bench and walked toward her, slowly, like a predator in no hurry. "Your voice isn't just sound," he murmured, low, so close the warmth of his breath grazed her skin. "It has fire." His gaze dropped to her lips. Hye-Rin turned her face away, but couldn't hide the flush that betrayed the effect he had on her. The next morning, the rehearsal room was packed. The maestro introduced the new members, and everyone turned when Hye-Rin's name was called. She shrank beneath the curious stares, but when she sang, the entire choir murmured. Something in her voice set the room ablaze. QM stayed in the back, impassive, but inside, he remembered the night before, the heat of the empty stage, her nearness, the charged silence. That girl was not just another voice. She was a dangerous invitation. During the break, Hye-Rin walked the corridor, nervous hands fidgeting with her scores. Suddenly, QM appeared, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, eyes fixed. "Are you afraid?" he asked. She knit her brows. "Afraid of what?" He leaned forward, narrowing the distance. The corridor seemed to tighten around them. "Of singing with me," she laughed, nervous. "And why would I be afraid?" Kyuam moved closer still, his voice now a warm whisper in her ear. "Because when our music meets, it isn't just music." Hina's whole body trembled. She tried to step back, but his eyes held her like invisible chains. In the days that followed, they began rehearsing together in secret, not because it was officially forbidden, but because there was something in the air, something that burned and couldn't be exposed. Sometimes a single look changed the melody's direction. Other times, music was merely an excuse for closeness, for her body to lean over his, for their fingers to brush lightly on the keys. Until one night, they decided to turn off the lights, only the piano lit by moonlight. She sang with eyes closed, feeling every vibration in her chest. He played so near he could hear her breath, unsteady, mixing with the notes. Then, by accident, her hand settled on his. It was quick, but incendiary. Kyuam didn't pull away. He locked her fingers with his, firm, gazing at her in the half-light like someone who had already decided something dangerous. And, for a moment, the silence was more provocative than any music, until the creak of a door echoed in the corridor. They broke apart abruptly, like accomplices caught mid-crime, but her heart still burned, and his eyes still blazed. They both knew there was no turning back. What would happen when someone discovered that forbidden melody that was becoming more and more desire? The music school's routine looked the same to everyone else. Corridors full of scores, voices warming up, violins tuning. But for Hye-Rin, nothing was the same. Every step brought back the memory of Kyuam's hand holding hers. Every chord recalled the heat of his gaze in the dim light. During official rehearsal, the maestro led the choir with rigidity, but Kyuam wasn't fully obeying. At the piano, he modulated the notes just enough for Hina's voice to sound more alive, hotter, more laden with something no one could explain. She noticed, and when she finished her solo, not only did the room burst into murmurs, but her whole body trembled, as if she had just been touched. At break, a classmate approached with a crooked smile. "You and Kyuam are rehearsing alone, aren't you?" Hye-Rin flushed. No, of course not." But before she could tangle herself further, Kyuam appeared behind her, so close she felt the heat of his body before hearing his voice. "We have rehearsal," he said firmly, as if it were an order. The group fell silent, watching the two walk off together. Everyone's eyes burned with suspicion, but Hye-Rin's heart burned for another reason. In the empty rehearsal room, the curtains filtered the light in golden tones. Kyuam sat at the piano and, without looking at her, began to play a new melody, slow, dragged, almost indecent. Each note slid over her skin like invisible fingers. "Sing," he said without lifting his eyes. Hye-Rin swallowed. This wasn't a normal rehearsal. It was a provocation. Even so, she parted her lips and let her voice escape. Soft at first, then steadier, as if answering his invitation. The more she dared, the stronger he played. The more he softened, the closer she moved, until they were so near the air between them seemed to vibrate. Suddenly, Kyuam stopped playing. The silence dropped heavy. He lifted his eyes and stared at her up close, their faces only inches apart. "You feel it too, don't you?" His voice came low, loaded with danger. She hesitated, but her body answered before words could. A shiver raced across her skin. "I do," she confessed, breath unsteady. He let his fingers brush hers over the keyboard. It was a simple touch, but full of intention, prolonged, as if every second were delicious torture. Before the moment could explode, the room's door opened abruptly. A classmate entered, startled, freezing at the sight of them so close. Sorry, I didn't know anyone was here." He hurried out, but the damage was done. Hye-Rin backed away, heart in despair. "We're being reckless," she murmured, trying to catch her breath. Kyuam, however, showed no regret. He stepped closer, meeting her eyes with resolve. "No, we're being truthful." That night, Hye-Rin couldn't sleep. She left the dorm and walked to the balcony, feeling the cold wind caress her skin. She looked at the moon and wondered if Kyuam was awake too. Then a familiar sound crossed the silence. Piano. A slow, deep touch coming from the auditorium. Her feet moved on their own. She crossed the empty courtyard, entered the room lit only by moonlight, and found him there, playing as if the piano were a body to be bared. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. Kyuam looked up and gave a sidelong smile, a rare smile, loaded with intention. "Not without you." She approached slowly, each step echoing as if part of the melody. She sat beside him on the narrow bench, so close the heat of their bodies blurred together. "Maybe I need your music to fall asleep," she whispered. He laughed, a short laugh, and let the sentence die in silence. Then he played again, but this time the notes were too soft, almost whispers. Hye-Rin closed her eyes. With every chord she felt his breath closer. With every pause, the silence seemed to beg for something neither of them dared to name. The moment was about to spill into something more, when a detail froze them. Footsteps in the corridor. Kyum stopped. The piano went silent. Both stayed still, only breathing in the dark, their bodies almost touching. On the other side of the door, the sound ceased, but hidden in the shadows, someone watched. The maestro, and his eyes reflected not only suspicion, they reflected the fury of someone about to intervene. The next morning, the atmosphere at school was heavy. The maestro said nothing, but his eyes were like blades. During rehearsal, every correction sounded harsher than usual. Kyum, at the piano, felt each glance like a veiled threat. Hye-Rin, singing, trembled inside, as if she could be unmasked at any moment. When the break came, the maestro called Kyum aside. The room was cold, lit only by half-closed blinds. "You're drifting," he said, curt. "Your music has lost discipline." Kyum lifted his gaze. "Steady. Music isn't only discipline." The maestro narrowed his eyes. "It isn't weakness either. Control yourself, or it will be your ruin." Kyum left the room with his heart racing, but his gaze hardened. The warning wasn't about music. It was about her. That night, Hye-Rin entered the rehearsal room slowly. The piano waited in the center, lit only by moonlight. Kyum was already there, playing a slow melody, heavy with something dark. "You're different," she said, approaching. He stopped playing but didn't turn. "The maestro knows." Her heart leapt. "Knows what?" Kyum rose, moving toward her in slow steps. His eyes were somber but intense. "He knows there's something between us, and he'll try to destroy us for it." Hye-Rin bit her lip, nervous. "Then, should we stop?" Kyum held her face in both hands, firm, as if afraid to lose her. His voice came low but fervent. "I can't stop. When you sing, I breathe." Her breath faltered. They were so close the warmth of their lips nearly touched. He didn't kiss her. He rested his forehead against hers, and that simple gesture was more intimate than any touch. The days that followed were ones of constant risk. In official rehearsals, they barely looked at each other. But in the quiet nights, they met in secret, bolder, each time. Sometimes they played and sang in absolute darkness, guided only by sound and touch. Other times, they needed no music at all, just shared silence, the sound of ragged breath, bodies almost brushing. Every accidental touch felt like fire, every stolen look, an unspoken promise, until, one of those nights, Hye-Rin dared more. She sang a forbidden song outside the school's repertoire, a raw song, brimming with intensity. Her voice filled the air like a cry for freedom. Kyum, seized by her audacity, accompanied her on the piano. The sound transformed into something wild, irresistible, as if they were undressing through melody. When they finished, they were breathless, their bodies so close there seemed no space for anything between them. "This is ours," Hye-Rin murmured, eyes shining. Kyum almost kissed her then and there, but fate said no. Suddenly, they heard footsteps in the corridor. Kyum pulled Hye-Rin back inside, killed the lights, and pressed her against the wall. He covered her mouth with his hand, keeping her silent. Her heart pounded. He was so close she felt his breath against her skin, the heat of his body against hers. The footsteps stopped in front of the door. The silence was suffocating. Hye-Rin trembled, but not from fear. Her whole body responded to Kyum's nearness, to the firm hand holding her in the dark. Seconds dragged like hours until the footsteps moved away. Kyum slowly lifted his hand from her mouth, but didn't step back. He stayed with his face against hers, eyes gleaming in the gloom. "This is getting too dangerous," she whispered, trembling. Kyum leaned in further, his lips almost brushing hers. "Then tell me to stop." Hye-Rin remained silent, not because she had no answer, but because her gaze already said everything. Outside in the dark hallway, a silhouette halted before the door. The maestro. This time he didn't just suspect, he was sure, and his eyes held resolve. The next morning's rehearsal began in heavy air. The maestro was different. His eyes didn't sweep the choir as usual. They were fixed, sharp, nailed to Kyum and Hye-Rin. Kayuam noticed but didn't look away. He played with firmness, as if defying with every chord. Hye-Na, however, felt the weight of surveillance in every note. Her voice wavered until it found his eyes. Steady, sure, intense. Then she sang stronger, as if singing only to him. The maestro struck his baton hard against the stand. "Kayuam! Hye-Na! My office! Now!" The hall filled with murmurs. The two stood, keeping posture, hearts thundering. The maestro's office was cold, lined with old scores. He stared at them for long seconds before he spoke. "Music is discipline, not temptation." His voice was slicing, almost cruel. "What's happening between you is staining this school." Hye-Na lowered her eyes, biting her lip. Kayuam, however, stepped forward. "Music exists only because feeling exists. Without it, it isn't music. It's just noise." The maestro slammed his hand on the desk, furious. "Careful, Kayuam. You're destroying your career." He didn't reply. He simply held out his hand to Hye-Na and led her out, as if he owed no more explanations. In the corridor, her breathing was quick, chest rising and falling. "Maybe he's right. Maybe we should stop." Kayuam pulled her closer, so near she felt the heat of his body. "And can you?" he whispered, eyes locked on hers. Her silence was answer enough. That night, Hye-Na tried to be alone. She sang in the dorm, practiced softly, but her voice came out weak, soulless. The more she tried to keep away, the emptier she felt. Meanwhile, Kayuam ran his fingers over the keys without playing. The piano was mute. So was he. 2 days dragged by like that. Until, at dusk, Kayuam found her sitting on the empty stage, arms wrapped around herself. Her eyes were wet. "Why are you crying?" he asked. Low, she lifted her face. "Because without you, I can't sing." The words shattered any barrier. Kayuam climbed onto the stage and wrapped her in a strong embrace, as if he meant to keep her against him forever. She sank into him, breathing his scent, feeling the steadiness of his hands on her back. "Then we won't sing alone anymore," he whispered. "Never again." That same night, they returned to the rehearsal room, but this time there was no hesitation. The curtains were closed, the piano lit only by moonlight. Kayuam played as if every chord were a touch. Hye-Na sung as if every note were a restrained moan. They were so close they no longer knew if it was music or desire. Every breath merged. Every silence was an invitation. When the last note died, there was no applause, no pause. Only their gaze, blazing, and bodies so close they asked for more. "I don't want to hide anymore," Hye-Na said, voice trembling but firm. Kayuam slid his fingers along her hand, up her arm, as if discovering the melody of her skin. "Then we won't." Before their lips met, a brutal sound split the moment. The door opened. The maestro stood there. The corridor light spilled over the two, far too close to deny. The silence was suffocating. He stared at them in fury and said only, "Starting tomorrow, you do not play together." He left, the threat hanging in the air like a sentence. Hye-Na fell onto the bench, drained. Kayuam remained standing, eyes fixed on the closed door, fists clenched. They'd been discovered. But the question was, would the desire that bound them be stronger than the ban? The maestro kept his promise. In the days that followed, Kayuam and Hye-Na were separated in every rehearsal. She, hidden in the choir, sang bland lines. He, at the piano, accompanied soloists who stirred nothing in him but boredom. The flame seemed smothered, but a quick glance, eyes meeting from afar, and the blaze rekindled in silence. That night, Hye-Na couldn't stand it. She wrote a note in haste, hands trembling. "I can't sing without you. Auditorium, midnight." Kayuam found the message tucked among his scores. When he read it, he didn't smile. His heart simply raced, and he knew he would be there. The auditorium was deserted, the stage drowned in half-light. Hye-Na waited standing, her whole body thrumming with expectation and fear. When Kayuam entered, her breath hitched. "You're out of your mind," he said, holding the crumpled note. "If they catch us? If they catch us?" She cut in, biting her lip, voice low, charged with daring. "At least they'll know we didn't keep quiet." Kayuam let the paper fall and walked to the piano. He sat and struck the first chord, deep, resonant. "Then let's play as if it were the last time." The music began dense, dragging, each note a touch, each pause a sigh. Hye-Na sang with eyes closed, her body moving as if following his rhythm more than the melody. Kayuam watched her. The parted lips, the raised goose flesh, the way each note seemed to rise from deep within her body. He didn't play just to accompany. He played to provoke. The empty stage became an accomplice. With every look, every lean, there was more desire than music. The sound wasn't rehearsal. It was one body calling to another. When the last note died, the silence was absolute. They were both breathless, bodies close, eyes blazing. Hye-Rin smiled, tears in her eyes. That wasn't music. That was us. A sharp clap broke the moment. They turned. In the shadows, a few classmates watched them. Some gazes showed shock, others admiration. One of them murmured, "You need to show that at the recital." Hye-Rin's heart almost stopped. The annual recital was the school's biggest event. The maestro would never allow it. But when Kyuam heard that, he simply closed his eyes and drew a deep breath. They want us to set the stage on fire. In the days that followed, they met more and more. Now not just for desire, but for preparation. They rehearsed in secret, polishing every detail of a song that existed on no official score. Kyuam composed a melody just for them, full of dramatic pauses, changes of tempo, chords that sounded like provocations, replies, sighs. Each rehearsal was a risk. Every time a door creaked in the corridor, they sprang apart like criminals caught in the act. But each time they began again, the tension was even more intense. "This could destroy us," Hye-Rin said one night, voice thick, body trembling after another clandestine rehearsal. Kyuam gripped her face, eyes blazing. "Or it could save us." Their lips nearly met then, but they held back. They saved the desire for the stage, where nothing could be hidden. The day of the recital arrived. The auditorium was packed. Parents, teachers, guests. The maestro stalked the wings like a jailer, baton in hand like a whip. Kyuam and Hye-Rin were separated in the program. But when the next-to-last piece ended, Kyuam did the unthinkable. He sat at the piano, ignored the maestro, and began to play the secret melody. The hall froze. At the back, Hye-Rin lifted a hand to her chest. That was the call, the invitation. She stepped forward, then another step, and she was already at center stage in front of everyone. The piano guided her. Her voice broke the silence, trembling at first, then steady, then overwhelming. Every note was a confession, every glance at Kyuam a surrender. The audience remained mute, spellbound. The maestro stood beside the stage, furious, but he couldn't stop it. The power of that music was greater than discipline, and when the last note rang out, there was silence, a silence so charged it felt explosive. Then the entire auditorium erupted in applause. The maestro strode onto the stage, eyes aflame. "What do you think you're doing?" he shouted. Kyuam didn't release Hye-Rin's hand. He looked straight at the maestro and answered, firm, showing what music truly is. The audience went still, waiting for the next move, and the maestro, motionless, breathed deep, as if about to turn his fury into vengeance. The silence after the recital was deafening. The audience still on their feet, applause echoing. But the maestro cut across the stage like a judge ready to pass sentence. "You have crossed every line," he said, voice thunderous. "You've turned this school into a cheap spectacle." Kyuam didn't let go of Hye-Rin's hand. His gaze was steady, razor sharp. "No, we've turned it into truth." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some teachers looked away. Others seemed to swallow tears. The maestro, however, did not waver. "You're suspended," he decreed. "Until further notice, you do not play, do not sing, do not perform in anything at this school." The room was shocked. Hye-Rin felt her legs buckle, but Kyuam held her up. The audience broke into applause again, even louder, as if trying to shield them with clapping. But nothing drowned out the maestro's sentence. In the days that followed, the school became a prison. Kyuam spent hours before a closed piano, forbidden to play. Hye-Rin, excluded from rehearsals, wandered the corridors under reproving eyes. But at night, they slipped away. Clandestine meetings in deserted hallways, in the empty auditorium. In those moments, the school's silence turned dangerous. Every closed door hid a secret. Every shadow was an accomplice. One of those nights, Kyuam sat at the piano but didn't play. He pounded his hands against the keys as if unloading anger. Hye-Rin entered quietly, watching him. When he looked up, his face was sweaty, lips parted. "I can't stand it anymore," he said, voice rough. "I want to hear your voice, even if it's the last time." Hye-Rin shut the door behind her. The hard click echoed like a pact. She moved slowly toward him and began to sing softly, just for him. Her gentle voice, laden with desire, filled the space between them. Kyuam stood suddenly, rounded the piano, and pulled her by the waist. "When you sing just for me," he whispered in her ear, so close she trembled, "I feel like the whole world disappears." She didn't answer. She simply held his face in both hands, and this time there was no restraint. The kiss burst urgent, deep, full of all the hunger that had been held back. The piano vibrated behind them with the impact of their bodies leaning against it. Every touch burned. Every breath was a stolen sigh. The music wasn't in notes. It was in muffled moans, in locked lips, in hands exploring forbidden territory. When they pulled back for a moment, breathless, Hye-Rin rested her forehead on his chest, still trembling. "If they catch us, it's over." Kyuam held her face firmly. "I'd rather be expelled than live without you." The words sealed something bigger than fear, but the maestro wasn't ready to yield. He convened the school council, demanding their immediate expulsion. The meeting was tense. Teachers divided. Some called for discipline. Others admitted their music was something rare, impossible to silence. Meanwhile, Kyuam and Hye-Rin met like love-struck fugitives. Each secret rehearsal was bolder, more intimate, as if daring the whole world to stop them. One night, Kyuam scribbled a few notes on a loose sheet and handed it to her. "It's our song," he said. "If they expel us, we'll play it outside these walls. If they try to separate us, we'll sing it louder." Hye-Rin held the score to her chest, moved. "Even if the whole world condemns us." Kyuam pressed his lips to hers, cutting her off. "Then we'll burn the whole world." The next morning, the corridors were abuzz. An announcement was read aloud. Kyuam and Hye-Rin were to appear before the council for the final decision. News spread like wildfire. Some classmates whispered it would be the end. Others, in secret, rooted for them to hold fast. Hand in hand, they walked to the council room. The maestro was already waiting, eyes sharp as blades. "You'll have to choose," he said coldly. "Either music or this foolish illusion." Kyuam didn't hesitate. "We won't choose. Because music only exists when we're together." The silence was heavy, until one of the senior professors moved, stood. "Don't you see? What they have already inspires all of us. This flame should not be put out." The maestro closed his eyes, trying to stifle his fury. He knew his authority was crumbling. That night, Kyuam and Hye-Rin returned to the rehearsal room. The piano was there, waiting, and when they played together again, there was no fear. There was only surrender, notes that felt like caresses, pauses that burned like kisses, looks that blazed like promises. They knew the fight wasn't over. The maestro would do everything to bring them down. But inside them, the blaze was already uncontrollable, and the question that hung was, how far were they willing to burn? The school's corridors were suffocatingly quiet. Where music once flowed, now only tension remained. The maestro had called in the administration, and that afternoon, the sentence fell like a stone. "You will no longer study together," he said, cold, before everyone. "Kyuam will have individual lessons. Hye-Rin will return to the choir under different supervision, and if there's one more act of insubordination, expulsion." The room froze. Hye-Rin felt the air vanish. Kyuam clenched his fists but didn't argue. He just shot the maestro a look of contempt before leaving. That night, the stage was empty. The heavy curtains kept the echo of silence. Hye-Rin sat at the edge, hugging her knees. Her tears fell unchecked. She sang softly, but her voice came out fragile, broken, as if half of her were missing. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the auditorium. Kyuam emerged from the shadows, gaze dark but steady. "You really think he can separate us?" Hye-Rin lifted her wet face, surprised. Kyuam walked to her and knelt, taking her cold hands. "Music brought me to you. There's nothing that can erase that." She tried to protest, but his gaze burned too much. "And if we're expelled?" she whispered, fearing the answer. Kyuam caressed her face, fingers sliding as if memorizing the melody of her skin. "Then we'll be expelled together, but we'll never stop playing." Hye-Rin smiled through tears. She knew there was no turning back. In the days that followed, they tried to obey the rules. Kyuam locked in a stuffy room, playing empty scales. Hye-Rin hidden in the choir, without spark. But their music had become a habit. There was no discipline that could silence it. The next night, they met in secret. The piano was an accomplice once more. Kyuam played a slow melody, heavy with desire. Hye-Rin joined him, But her voice was no longer just music. It was confession, rapture, surrender. With every pause, their eyes found each other. With every chord, their bodies drew closer, until rehearsal turned into something more. Uneven breaths, hands exploring forbidden terrain, kisses stolen between notes. The piano groaned beneath their weight, a partner in a melody made of skin and hunger. "This will destroy us," Hye-Rin whispered, breathless, between one kiss and the next. Kye-Rin rested his forehead against hers, hands firm at her waist. "Then let it destroy us. But let it destroy us together." The next day, the official announcement of the end-of-term recital filled the corridors with anticipation. It was the year's biggest event, the school's showcase. The maestro had already set a program with no space for the two of them together, but Kye-Rin had other plans. That night, he showed Hye-Rin a hand-scribbled score. "It's our music," he said, firm. "We're going to play it at the recital." She widened her eyes, frightened. "Kye-Rin, that's insane." He held her face, gazing deep. "What's worse, to be remembered for a lie, or for a single true song?" Hye-Rin trembled but didn't answer. The kiss that joined them was the only possible reply. The following days were devoted to secret rehearsal. Each meeting carried even more risk. But with every chord, every look, it became clear. They had already chosen. On the eve of the recital, Hye-Rin dreamed she stepped onto the stage, and when she opened her mouth, no voice came out. She woke in tears, shaken. The next morning, she told Kye-Rin in the garden. He pressed her hand to his chest. "If your voice fails, listen to this." His heart beat strong, unwavering, and sing with it. She closed her eyes, hearing the steady rhythm, and smiled. But backstage, the maestro had found the hidden score. His eyes hardened. "They wouldn't dare," he muttered. But deep down, he knew. Yes, they would. On the night of the recital, the packed auditorium thrummed with expectation. The closed curtains hid the lit stage. Kye-Rin and Hye-Rin stood among the others, but their hearts beat at a different frequency. The maestro paced the aisles, wary, suspicious, his baton like a weapon ready to strike. When the penultimate piece ended, Kye-Rin made his decision. He sat at the piano and played the first chord of the secret melody. The hall froze. Hye-Rin felt her whole body tremble. That was the call, the invitation, the absolute risk. She took a step, another, and moved to the center of the stage. The piano guided her. Her voice rose, trembling at first, then firm, then sweeping. The audience fell silent, hypnotized. The maestro standing at the back went pale. His fury grew with every note, but it was already too late. The forbidden melody was alive. The entire auditorium held its breath as the first notes rang out. It wasn't the official program. It wasn't what the maestro had approved. It was something else. A raw, deep, overwhelming sound. Kye-Rin played as if every chord were a confession. His fingers moved fast, intense. His body curved over the piano as if he commanded not only the keys, but the very air in the room. And then, Hye-Rin's voice entered. Soft at first, as if asking permission to exist. Then steady, charged with fire, until it exploded into notes that sliced through the auditorium like blades of desire. Everyone stood motionless. Parents, teachers, students. No one dared cough, breathe loudly, or look away. At the back, the maestro stood, baton trembling in his hand. His eyes were pure fury, but Kye-Rin didn't look away. He played each note as if challenging the master with his very body, and Hye-Rin sang as if each syllable were a stolen kiss, a stifled moan, a surrender that words could not hold. The audience didn't see only music. They saw two bodies in sync, two souls undressing before each other in the form of melody. When Hye-Rin's voice reached its peak, Kye-Rin paused for a second, creating a charged silence. In that instant, his eyes found hers. There was no fear anymore, and what happened next wasn't planned. She crossed the stage and stopped at his side. He stood, music still echoing in the last notes, and pulled her close. The audience hung in suspense, a collective heart suspended. And then Kye-Rin kissed her, there, on stage, in front of everyone. The maestro shouted, furious, "This is insubordination! It's shameful!" But his voice was swallowed by a roar of applause. Professors rose, some in tears. Classmates clapped, shouted their names. The audience gave them a standing ovation, relentless. The maestro tried to advance, but it was useless. The crowd no longer applauded a performance. They applauded an act of freedom. Hye-Rin still trembled, but her eyes shone as never before. Kyuam held her by the waist, firm, as if nothing could separate them. "Now the world knows," he murmured, still close, breath mingling with hers, and she smiled, tears running down her face, "that our music was never forbidden. It was inevitable." The recital ended in catharsis. Parents and students spoke, moved, as if they had witnessed something they would never forget. Meanwhile, the maestro left the stage in silence, defeated, his baton fallen to the floor. Backstage, Kyuam and Hye-Rin were still breathless, hearts racing. She looked at him, biting her lip. "You know this might have ended everything, don't you?" Kyuam gave a sidelong, intense, provocative smile. "Or it might have started everything." He pulled her into another kiss, deep, fearless, while outside, the audience was still applauding. Months passed after the recital that set the school ablaze. The maestro no longer laid down rules. He had requested leave, unable to bear the defeat. And the corridors, once marked by rigidity, breathed differently now. More freedom in rehearsals, more emotion in voices, more daring in glances. But Kyuam and Hye-Rin no longer belonged to that discipline of cold walls. They belonged to each other. On a special night, the school opened its doors for a concert in honor of the new chapter. The stage glowed golden. The audience vibrated. At the center, only them. Kyuam at the piano, Hye-Rin at the microphone. But their eyes weren't on the audience. They were only on each other. The music began slow, seductive, like a caress, each note an invitation, each syllable a forbidden touch turned to poetry. And as the melody swelled, desire was present in every look, every secret smile, every heavier breath. When the last note echoed, the audience burst into applause. But for them, there was no audience anymore. The whole world had disappeared. Later, alone in the rehearsal room where it had all begun, they found the same complicit silence. The closed piano reflected the moonlight, and the curtains held the same smell of wood and dust. Kyuam ran his fingers along the skin of her arm as if it were a keyboard. "Our music never needed an audience," he murmured. Hye-Rin smiled, tilting her face, lips inches from his. "Because it was always made just for us." The kiss that followed wasn't urgent like before, nor hidden. It was slow, deep, laden with the certainty of those who no longer needed to hide. The piano, silent, seemed to listen. The moon bore witness, and the world outside didn't matter. In that instant, there was no maestro, no school, no rules. There were only two souls who dared turn music into desire, and desire into eternity. Because some melodies never end. They continue, ever more intense, inside the bodies that had the courage to touch them. Did your heart race with this story too? Kyuam and Hye-Rin showed that some melodies aren't made for sheet music, but for bodies, glances, and forbidden desires. And now I want to know, which moment made you hold your breath the most? Leave your comment down below. I'd love to know which scene set your heart on fire. And if you like intense, provocative, sweeping stories, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because every drama we create together is a new flame, and I want you with me to feel every chord to the last sigh.